5 more days. Zhen looked at Lu Beichuan and smiled. I'll attend to you for 5 more days. After 5 more days, I can say my goodbyes. Her careful planning had finally given her the results she wanted. She only needed to be patient for 5 more days, then she could smoothly leave the Lu family. When she thought about it, it was truly something that brought her joy. Zhen yawned. Her body felt weak, and she didn't feel like moving. As she turned her neck left and right and stretched her muscles and bones, she thought about the red marks on her neck that the caregivers had been talking about. She walked to the bathroom and pulled down her collar. The 2 fingernail-sized red marks looked especially conspicuous on her pale throat. Zhen's eyes lingered on the marks. She couldn't help blankly staring at them. When had these red marks appeared? Why didn't she have any impression of getting them? Mosquito bite? Or was it an allergy? Stroking those 2 red marks, Zhen sunk into deep thought. She wasn't a simple, inexperienced young girl. These 2 marks were clearly hickeys. Because her skin was fair and given the extent of the discoloration, the marks still hadn't faded even though a few days had passed. But she hadn't had any intimate contact with anyone during this past period. Other than in her dreams. Could this really be an allergic reaction? When night had fully overtaken day, Zhen closed the window and put down the curtains. She looked at Lu Beichuan, who was still unconscious, and after a moment of consideration, she took a quilt and lied down on the couch to sleep. She still had that dream. In her dream, the man repeatedly went up and down on her body, over and over. It was as if he was going to swallow her alive. He was worse than ferocious, wild animals. She gasped and pleaded for him to stop, but he continued to torment her. She was helpless. She could only passively accept this. She couldn't even cry out. When she woke up from her sleep, Zhen felt very satiated. She languidly stretched her upper body. Feeling muzzy, she closed her eyes and decided to go back to sleep. In the next second, she abruptly opened her eyes. Her mind had gained clarity. She noticed that she wasn't sleeping on the couch. She was on the bed. What made her even more startled was that her head had been resting on Lu Beichuan's shoulder. One hand was resting on Lu Beichuan's chest. The other hand was beneath the quilt and tightly holding Lu Beichuan's hand. They were within reach of each other. This position, it looked as if she had taken the initiative to hug Lu Beichuan. Zhen blankly stared at him. Her mind was empty. It felt as if she was waking up from a drunken haze. Seeing that the door was tightly closed, she blankly got up and left the bed. When had she gotten onto the bed? The quilt was properly spread out over the bed. The couch was tidy without anything out of place. The scene in front of her told her that everything she did before going to sleep had been a figment of her imagination. As soon as her feet touched the carpet, her legs felt weak. Zhen almost fell down. After returning to her senses and placing a hand over her waist, she hissed in pain. She felt as if she couldn't believe her own senses. The area under her waist felt so sore and weak that it felt as if it wasn't her body. She thought of last night's dream. That dream wasn't any different from the previous dreams. But, in the past, when she woke up, she would feel very refreshed. Why did she wake up feeling so sore and weak today? Zhen's intuition led her to question if last night had really been a dream. Given everything that had occurred during this period of time, she couldn't use common sense to deduce what had happened. She had been going along with the novel's tempo and firmly believed in the novel's plot. But, she had come to this world. Wasn't her existence the biggest glitch in the novel? Could it be? Zhen hesitantly looked at the unconscious Lu Beichuan on the bed and pensively contemplated. Zhen had always been a hedonist and believed in pursuing instant gratification. She had been quite satisfied with last night's exercise. She had high-level self-awareness. She was playing out Zhen's role, and Lu Beichuan saw her as his wife. For a husband and wife to do last night's activities, it was perfectly normal. However, she couldn't accept being played around like a fool. She walked to Lu Beichuan's bed and leaned over to look at the Lu Beichuan's sleeping face. She stared at his unmoving eyes as well as his black eyelashes. If he was just pretending to sleep, there would definitely be a flaw. The distance between her and Lu Beichuan was only the width of a fine hair. Zhen's shallow breathing blew over Lu Beichuan's face. She could see his fine facial hair slightly moving. Yi Zhen's eyes felt strained from how hard she was staring, but she didn't see any flaws. What great willpower. Yi Zhen straightened up. She rubbed her sore waist as she walked over to the bathroom to wash up. She spent the rest of the day being absent-minded, to the point that even Mother Lu couldn't resist asking her what was wrong. Nighttime arrived in a flash. Yi Zhen passed by the kitchen and happened to see Lu family's old butler putting a white pill into a cup of warm milk. The white pill had been taken out of a white bottle. After the pill was put into that warm milk, the old butler stirred it with a spoon. Yi Zhen suddenly remembered. Every night, she would drink a cup of warm milk that was brought over by the old butler. The old butler had been drugging her milk. Why? Yi Zhen didn't have to think. The old butler put the cup of milk onto a tray. Yi Zhen hastily dodged behind a large flower vase. She waited there until he has passed through the living room and gone upstairs. Then she went into the kitchen. The white bottle of pills had been left on the table. Yi Zhen took a pill out of the bottle. Then, acting as if nothing had happened, she went upstairs. Before she could push the door open, the old butler came out from the room. Seeing Yi Zhen, he smiled and said, "Miss Yi, so you were out here. Uncle Xiao, why were you looking for me?" Uncle Xiao smiled. "I came here to bring you milk, Miss Yi. I left it on the table. Drink it while it's still warm." While Uncle Xiao was saying this, Yi Zhen stared at his eyes, but his eyes were full of kindly affection. There was no hint of deception. "Okay, thank you for going through trouble." "No trouble at all. You should rest early. Good night." "Good night, Uncle Xiao." Yi Zhen naturally didn't touch the cup of milk after going inside. She directly poured it into the toilet. Just in case, Yi Zhen took out a tie from the closet and tied Lu Beichuan's hands together. After tying a firm knot, she went to sleep without worries. The next morning, when William was doing his daily examination of Lu Beichuan, Yi Zhen quietly called William to the side. William thought she wanted to ask him about Lu Beichuan's condition in private, so he didn't think anything of it. He handed over the examination work to his assistant. Yi Zhen presented the white pill that she had taken from the butler to William. "Doctor, can you tell me what this medicine is for?" William took the medicine. Yi Zhen continued to say, "I don't have any idea what this medicine is for." "If you can't easily tell what this medicine is for, then can you?" Not waiting for Yi Zhen to finish speaking, William smiled and looked at her as he asked, "Have you been feeling sore and weak lately?" Yi Zhen blankly stared at him. Soon after, she nodded. "I prescribed this medicine for you." Yi Zhen looked at him with a pair of very doubtful eyes. "Old Master Lu saw how tired you are from taking care of Mr. Lu, so he had me prescribe a medicine to help you sleep and had the butler put it in your milk. This medicine lengthens your deep sleep period." William smiled. "Deep sleep can help alleviate your daily tiredness and boost your body's metabolism. It's very good for your health. Don't worry, this medicine doesn't have any negative effects. You're saying that the reason I've been feeling sore and weak lately is because I'm working too hard during the day?" William nodded. "I noticed that you usually spend the entire day massaging Mr. Lu. You're still young, so your body can endure the tiring work. But, if this goes on for too long, it won't be good for you." As a specialist doctor, William was especially sensitive to pathological features. His gaze landed on the red marks on Yi Zhen's neck, and his forehead wrinkled. "Miss Yi, those red marks on your neck. Would you mind getting an examination?" "Examination? An examination for allergies," said William. "I suspect that you're allergic to something in this room." Yi Zhen instinctively touched the red marks. "You're saying that the red marks on my neck is an allergic reaction?" William asked. "Miss Yi, what else do you think it can be?" Yi Zhen's cheeks flushed. She thought of those cloying scenes in her dreams and very unnaturally coughed. "Never mind. Thank you. When I have time, I'll go to the hospital for a checkup." William gracefully nodded. Once the daily examination was done, the doctor and nurses left the master bedroom. Yi Zhen looked at the man on the bed, who was still unconscious. She couldn't resist laughing. What exactly had she been thinking? After the car accident, he fell unconscious for a year. If Lu Beichuan wasn't genuinely comatose, why on earth would he lie in bed for a year? There was no benefit to overthinking things. Yi Zhen did her best to not think about these matters that had nothing to do with her. Everything had been arranged and was going according to Yi Zhen's plan. 3 days from now, she would be able to smoothly leave the Lu family. However, before that happened, she had to get her ID card. She had married into the Lu family with Yi Qing's identity, so she naturally had possession of Yi Qing's ID card. Yi Zhen's ID card remained with her parents. Before leaving here, she had to get it from them. She would be leaving here in 3 days, and Lu Beichuan wouldn't wake up for another half a month. When that time came, even if the Lu family wanted to look for someone, they would look for Yi Qing. While she, Yi Zhen, would be off in some distant part of the world living her life happily. Thinking of this, Yi Zhen sat down on Lu Beichuan's bed. His arms and hands were on top of the quilt. There were faint red marks on his wrists because Yi Zhen had tied his wrists together with a tie last night, so the blood hadn't circulate well. Yi Zhen gently rubbed Lu Beichuan's wrists. Her professional-level massage techniques were the results of her laborious efforts and learning from the caretaker. She hadn't been massaging for long before the red marks on Lu Beichuan's wrists had noticeably faded. Looking at Lu Beichuan, who was lying on the bed, Yi Zhen thought of her dog that she had raised for 5 years. After she had transmigrated here, she wondered how that stupid dog was doing. Was it still eating well? Had it gotten used to sleeping without her? Would she have a chance to see that stupid dog again in this lifetime? As soon as she thought of that dog, Yi Zhen's heart was adrift with sorrow. Feeling gloomy, she sighed. I've been doing my best to take care of you and for such a long period too. Even though the Lu family's intention was to give that jewelry to my older sister, I was the one that married you, so there's no reason to criticize me for taking some of them with me. Since we had that fate of getting married, I'll give you some advice. She thought of the novel's temperamental Lu Beichuan and worriedly said, First, absolutely don't do anything that's illegal. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you're very powerful. No matter how powerful you are, you can't escape from being punished by the law. Second, you were a perfectly good man. You have a wife and a son. Why did you fall for another woman? Wouldn't it be good just to live your lavish, wealthy lifestyle? Third, once you have a child in the future, you have to raise him properly. You're the child's father. You have to serve as a role model and walk him down the right path. These 3 points were probably the reason why the villain had walked to his doom, step by step. Although she knew that Lu Beichuan couldn't hear her words, Yi Zhen continued to quietly urge him, You have to live a good life. Live a good life by being a magnanimous person. Humans, they were all visual animals. If a very handsome man was weakly lying in front of you and you knew that he was going to experience a dark life and how he was going to go down the wrong path, step by step, wouldn't you be inclined to save him? Yi Zhen didn't know what other people would do in her situation. Anyways, this inclination had struck Yi Zhen, but it was only an inclination. She wasn't willing to stay by Lu Beichuan's side and help him avoid misfortune. She knew what her fate would be like if she stayed here. After going downstairs, Yi Zhen went to look for Mother Lu and told her she wanted to visit her maiden family to get something. Since there was no threat to her position in the Lu family recently, Mother Lu's mood had improved a lot. Smiling, she had the chauffeur drive Yi Zhen over and even urged her to be careful and take her time. If she wanted to reminisce, she could stay there overnight and come back tomorrow. This matched Yi Zhen's intention. Right after the chauffeur dropped her off at the Yi family's home, Yi Zhen ordered the chauffeur to go back without her. She said that she planned on spending the night here. Although the Yi family couldn't be compared to the Lu family, they were wealthy enough to be considered the nouveau riche. An ordinary family would never be able to afford the Yi family's detached 3-story villa. Ching Ching, seeing her daughter walking into the living room, Mother Yi happily got up. However, in the next second, she thought of something, and her good mood plummeted. Oh, it's you, Yi Zhen? Yi Zhen quickly walked over and quietly said, Mom, it's me. Mother Yi sighed. She sat down. Her tone sounded disappointed as she asked, Why did you come back? I came back to get something. I'll leave soon. Mother Yi nodded. Yi Zhen knew that Mother Yi didn't like her. It wasn't just because, Yi Zhen, was inarticulate, timid, and had mediocre abilities. It was more because when Mother Yi was giving birth in the hospital back then, Yi Qing's birth had gone smoothly, but Yi Zhen's birth had almost taken Mother Yi's life. Thus, Mother Yi had always treated Yi Zhen indifferently. It wasn't as bad as dislike, but she didn't care about her either. She spent the majority of her energy on her older daughter. This daughter's accomplishments allowed her to be immensely proud of her. Now that her older daughter had run off with an impoverished man, she was worried that she wasn't eating enough or sleeping well. During the past month, Mother Yi hadn't been able to sleep well. She tossed and turned every night. Yi Zhen passed through the living room and went to a room. This room was exquisitely decorated and stylistic arranged. A moment of thinking and Yi Zhen knew that this wasn't her room. She closed the door and opened the door to the other room. Mom, I'm going back. Mother Yi didn't like her. There was no reason for her to linger here. Mother Yi looked up and asked, "Do you have any news of your older sister?" Yi Zhen shook her head. Mother Yi sighed. Disappointed, she waved her off. "All right then, you can leave." She seemed to have no interest in asking about the quality of her life in the Lu family. Yi Zhen coldly nodded. Mother Yi didn't have any affection for her, and she felt the same way, so she naturally wouldn't waste her time by staying here. She immediately turned to leave. However, right after she walked out of the Yi family's villa, she saw a smiling Uncle Xiao standing in front of a shiny Bentley. "Miss Yi, hurry, come back with me." Young master woke up. Inside the fast Bentley, Yi Zhen sat in the back seat and impassively looked out the window. "Uncle Xiao, what's today's date?" "Miss Yi, today is the 4th. Yi Zhen looked out the window with a blank gaze. A while later, she asked, "Uncle Xiao, Mr. Lu." He really woke up? Uncle Xiao, who was sitting in the passenger seat at the front, turned his head back. His attitude towards her fully embodied the mannerism that should be directed towards the lady of the house. There was a kindly smile across his face as he said, "Yes, Miss Yi. Young master has really woken up. You've asked me this question 14 times. Once again, Yi Zhen turned to look out the window with a worried gaze. Don't believe in those outside rumors. I've watched young master grow up. He's actually the type of person that's cold to outsiders and warm to people he cares about. He's easy to get along with. You'll see this for yourself once you get to know him." A stiff smile appeared on Yi Zhen's lips. Of course, she knew what kind of person Lu Beichuan was. He was temperamental, violent, merciless, crazily cruel, and apathetic. He was someone that had a complete disregard for human life and guilty of monstrous crimes that made one's hair rise on end. He was someone that wouldn't even let off his own father. How could you have any hope that he had a semblance of a conscience? Right now, Yi Zhen felt overcome with apprehension. She had originally planned on leaving before Lu Beichuan woke up. At this point in time, she hadn't interacted with Lu Beichuan yet. If the Lu family found Yi Qing and brought her back, Lu Beichuan wouldn't have suspicions. But now that Lu Beichuan was awake, there would inevitably be face-to-face contact. There might even be deeper, intimate physical contact. Of course, that could only happen if Lu Beichuan had recovered normal bodily functions. As soon as she thought of that, Yi Zhen felt even more apprehensive. Why had the plot gone astray? Shouldn't Lu Beichuan be waking up half a month from now? What went wrong? Could it be that the plot was irreversible? Was she doomed to stay by Lu Beichuan's side as his wife and give birth to his son? And in the end, their family would neatly fall to a bleak ending. Was a happy ending impossible? The attentive old butler saw the apprehension on Yi Zhen's face, so he tried to comfort her. "Miss Yi, you really don't need to worry or be scared. Young master was the one that ordered me to bring you back." Yi Zhen choked. She showed a smile that looked worse than if she had outright cried. "I'm okay." The Bentley was driven smoothly and quickly. Yi Zhen looked at the chauffeur that was beaming with happiness. Her own expression was wooden. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the Lu family's villa. The old butler got out of the car and opened the door for Yi Zhen. He bowed and gestured for her to go inside. The members of Lu family's household looked very happy, as if today was New Year. Yi Zhen mustered up a stiff smile as she followed the old butler upstairs. The spacious room was crowded with people. Through the gap in the crowd, Zhen saw old Master Lu and Mother Lu sitting by the bedside. William was currently examining the awakened Lu Beichuan. Lu Beichuan seemed as if he hadn't been awake for long. His face was as pale as before. Lacking strength, he languidly leaned against the headboard. His eyes were lowered. He displayed an attitude of none of this stuff has anything to do with me, as if he wasn't the center of attention. Zhen freely stood outside of the crowd. After William finished his examination, he asked old Master Lu, "Mr. Lu, let's step away to talk?" Stepping away to talk meant that he didn't want Lu Beichuan to hear the results of the examination. In circumstances when the doctor didn't want to freely speak in front of the patient, the situations were usually bad. Everyone here understood William's meaning. Just as old Master Lu was preparing to stand up, he heard a low voice say, "Just stay here to talk." Hearing this voice, Zhen's ears suddenly felt heated. This voice sounded too similar to that overbearing voice in her dream that told her she wasn't allowed to cry. It carried a tone that wouldn't tolerate any contrary opinions. William glanced at old Master Lu. After receiving old Master Lu's consent, he said, "Although Mr. Lu has woken up, I still have to clearly explain the details to everyone. Mr. Lu's legs and waist as well as his brain was injured by the car accident a year ago. Because there was an injury to the brain, he was unconscious for almost a year. I conducted a preliminary appraisal of his legs injury a year ago. Based on today's examination, his lower half's injury is more serious than I estimated back then. I'm afraid." His worried tone made the listeners feel as if their hearts had flown up and were blocking their throats. A long time later, Mrs. Lu finally said, "Doctor, you mean?" "Of course, that's just the worst possible outcome. Nowadays, the study of medicine is advanced. There's still the possibility that Mr. Lu will be able to stand up." William's adequately comforting words let Mrs. Lu sigh in relief. Zhen also sighed in relief, but for a different reason. A disability was great. It would be better if he stayed a cripple instead of recovering full mobility and going out to do nefarious deeds. After hearing the answer, old Master Lu nodded and stood up. "I understand. Thank you for your hard work, Doctor." William smiled as he shook old Master Lu's hand. "I'm only doing what I should." After saying this, the crowd parted to allow William and the nurses to leave. Zhen also hastily moved to the side. "Yiqing, come here." Mrs. Lu caught a glimpse of Zhen standing at the edge of the crowd. She affably waved at her to come over. In the past, Mrs. Lu had disliked Zhen because she was timid, weak, and without her own opinions. They had married her into the Lu family in hopes that it would bring Lu Beichuan good luck, but he had remained unconscious. However, the situation was different now. Zhen had driven Lu Beichuan, who had tried to usurp her son's place, out of the Lu family, and her son had woken up. In the eyes of Mrs. Lu, this was double blessings. Her view of Zhen had completely changed. She saw her daughter-in-law as a sincere and considerate harbinger of blessings. Old Master Lu smiled too. That fortune teller's prediction is really accurate. He said that as long as Beichuan marries you, it's guaranteed that he'll wake up within a month. Isn't that the truth? Today, it's the 1-month anniversary of Yiqing marrying into the Lu family. Mrs. Lu held Zhen's hand and gestured for Zhen to sit down on the bed. Her words were full of happiness. "Qingqing, you're our family's treasure. Beichuan, don't blame us for marrying you without your permission. You have to know that you were a comatose person a month ago. At that time, what innocent girl would dare to marry you?" But Qingqing was willing. Mustering up her courage, Zhen sat down on the bed. Lowering her head and looking down, she deferred to listening to Mrs. Lu holding her hand while praising her. "Also, while you were unconscious, it was Qingqing that took care of you. Every day, she sat on the bed and spent the entire day massaging you. Just seeing this sight made me feel bad for her. Dr. William has said it's a miracle for you to wake up so soon. From how I see it, the majority of the credit goes to Qingqing. In the future, you have to treat her well. If you dare to bully her," Mrs. Lu pretended to angrily say the last part, "don't blame me for being unkind to you." Mrs. Lu patted the back of Zhen's hand. Smiling, she said, Qingqing, if Beichuan dares to bully you, don't have any reservations. Tell mother-in-law. Mother-in-law will get justice for you. Yi Zhen smiled and didn't say anything. Lu Beichuan leaned against the headboard and looked at Yi Zhen, who had her head lowered. From his viewpoint, he could see Yi Zhen's pale, slender, swan-like neck. When his gaze slid down her throat, he saw her clavicle, which formed a lovely hollow. It was a curvature that inspired obsession. For a long time, Lu Beichuan didn't say anything. He finally narrowed his eyes slightly and spat out one word from his throat, N. It could be considered acknowledging Yi Zhen's existence. Mrs. Lu thoroughly put down her worried heart. She knew that her son had his own way of thinking and intentions. When he wasn't willing, no one could force him to do anything, but once he agreed, it was even less likely for someone to forcefully change his mind. Since you agreed, once your health is better, let's have another wedding ceremony, so Qingqing can grandly marry into the Lu family as your wife. On the side, old Master Lu said, sure, and this matter will be given to you, the mother, to handle. Beichuan just woke up, so let's give him space to rest. Let's all leave. All right, then the matter is settled. As Mother Lu said this, she patted Yi Zhen's hand again. Her words and eyes had a deeper meaning. Stay here and keep Beichuan company. If Mrs. Lu had the slightest amount of dislike towards Yi Zhen, she absolutely wouldn't have allowed her to remain here. Yi Zhen wryly smiled in her mind, but her mouth could only agree. After old Master Lu and Mrs. Lu left, one after another, the crowd dispersed. Yi Zhen had stood up and was standing by the bed. She was left with the fate of awkwardly facing the man that she had shared a bed with for a month. This type of face-to-face contact would thoroughly expose her. If she had an opportunity to leave the Lu family later, and the Lu family found and brought Yi Qing back, they would end up feeling suspicious. If that happened, she was afraid it would be difficult for her to escape the fate of being the villain's wife and fall to her doom. She didn't say anything, and neither did Lu Beichuan. He thoughtfully looked at her. Underneath that gaze, it took a long time for Yi Zhen to stabilize her state of mind. She finally looked up and met Lu Beichuan's eyes. Actually, back then, grandfather, old Master Lu offered to save the Yi family's business in return for me marrying you. If you have any objections to this marriage, you can speak frankly with me. We can get divorced. You and I can each marry someone else. In the future, we'll have nothing to do with each other. It would be great if a conversation could resolve this issue. That would save time and effort. Marry someone else? Have nothing to do with each other? Lu Beichuan deeply looked at her. He revealed his wrists to her. In actuality, although the lines on his wrists hadn't completely faded, they weren't too eye-catching. However, in Yi Zhen's eyes, they were incomparable obtrusive. So my wife is someone with peculiar urges? Quote? Wasn't he supposed to not only dislike her, but utterly despise her? Why hadn't he gone along with her suggestion of severing their marital tie? Yi Zhen didn't understand. In the novel, Lu Beichuan hadn't liked Yi Zhen, so why did he want her to remain in the Lu family and be his wife? She carefully thought it over. Perhaps, it was because Yi Zhen had gotten pregnant and gave birth to Lu Beichuan's child. So, as long as she didn't sleep with Lu Beichuan and didn't get pregnant with Lu Beichuan's child, she would be fine? She just had to wait until Yi Qing came back, wait until Lu Beichuan fell in love with Yi Qing, and then she would swiftly give up her spot. Besides, Yi Zhen's gaze kept straying towards Lu Beichuan's lower half. William had said that Lu Beichuan's waist and legs were seriously injured. Did he even have the ability to do that right now? Following her gaze, Lu Beichuan couldn't help wrinkling his forehead. His little wife really had that type of kink? Yi Zhen had to admit that Lu Beichuan's skills had been very good in her dream. She had been satisfied. Although she was a hedonist, she couldn't blindly seek pleasure. Happiness couldn't be lumped together. For example, under the current circumstances, Lu Beichuan wasn't an acceptable partner. She would be happier if he remained unable to walk. Mr. Lu, I'll tell you the truth. If it wasn't because my dad's company was on the verge of bankruptcy and needed assistance, I wouldn't have married you. Moreover, the original intention behind the marriage was only to bring you good luck. Since you're already awake now, there's no reason for me to continue staying in the Lu family. Yi Zhen paused. More importantly, I have someone I like. You have someone you like? Lu Beichuan's eyes narrowed. His tone wasn't good. Although he knew that the woman in front of him was full of nonsense, and she said words that she didn't mean, his emotions were still agitated. Yes, the person I like is called Lin Zhan. If it wasn't because of you, I would have already married Lin Zhan. Yi Zhen looked at him. When she mentioned the past, her eyes held an unclear pain. Lin Zhan was the male lead in Newlywed, Misplaced Kindness. He was the great villain's younger half-brother. They shared the same father. He and his mother had been mutually dependent on each other since his childhood. Because he was an illegitimate child, he grew up receiving a lot of dirty looks and verbal abuse. He and Yi Qing were truly in love with each other. After Lin Zhan's mother died, it was precisely when Yi Qing was forced to marry Lu Beichuan. Faced with Yi Qing's tears, Lin Zhan decided to run away with Yi Qing. He left the area that he had lived in for over 20 years to start a new life with her. Moreover, Yi Zhen wasn't lying. The reason that the novel's Yi Zhen utterly hated Yi Qing was because these two sisters had fallen in love with the same man. It wasn't unexpected that these two sisters would have a falling out because of love. Yi Zhen knew that she had horribly offended the great villain, Lu Beichuan, by telling him this. He was a person that stood by his word. For him to hear that his wife had someone else in her heart, there could be no greater insult. First, there was no love between them. Second, there was nothing keeping them together, so why bother with staying together? However, Lu Beichuan indulgently smiled and quietly said, "I'll allow you to say these words in front of me this one time. Do you understand?" Lu Beichuan had an attractive face with prominent facial features. When he was coldly indifferent, he had a gloomy aura that made it hard for people to get close. But, when he smiled, Yi Zhen was almost swayed by his overwhelming valiant spirit. Yi Zhen deeply sighed. "Mr. Lu, this matter concerns your future. You don't understand me at all. You shouldn't be so careless. I hope that you can clearly think things through." Lu Beichuan nodded. "I'll carefully think about this. But, before I finish considering, you're still be wife. I hope that you can carry out the responsibilities and duties between a husband and wife." The responsibilities and duties between a husband and wife? Yi Zhen pursed her lips. Both husband and wife had the duty to procreate. Knocking was heard outside the door before William entered the room. He courteously said to Yi Zhen, "Miss Yi, I have to give Mr. Lu a private examination to check on his reproductive organs. Can you go downstairs and wait?" Yi Zhen was eager to leave the room. She quickly nodded, took a step back, and closed the door on her way out. William was an American citizen with Chinese ancestry. He was 1/4 British. His facial features were more exquisite and defined than the average Chinese person. Under the influence of his family and environment, he easily learned proper, good manners. He casually sat down on Lu Beichuan's bed like they were old friends and didn't show any trace of the reserved mannerism that he displayed in front of the rest of the Lu family. He swept his gaze over Lu Beichuan's legs and said, "Don't worry. Your legs will be fully healed within half a month." There wasn't any hint of worry on Lu Beichuan's face. He expressionlessly nodded. William couldn't help furrowing his brow when he saw Lu Beichuan's unconcerned expression. After checking that the door was tightly closed, he lowered his voice and said, "Didn't we agree that you would wait until your body was fully recovered before waking up? I told you to exercise patience and wait half a month. Why did you suddenly do this today? I was totally caught off guard. Look at yourself, you're still half paralyzed. Even if you wake up, what can you do? But, your dad is different. Half of a month will be enough time for your dad to monopolize the company." After speaking to this point, Williams couldn't control his anger, it went bubbling up. This is unintentionally alerting the enemy. The past half-year's arrangements are going to be wasted. Lu Beichuan didn't refute or say anything. He gently stroked the shallow marks on his wrist. William couldn't comprehend the confidence that Lu Beichuan felt. For him, victory was within his grasp. "I can't understand you guys. How can a father and son be willing to kill each other for money and power?" Lu Beichuan indifferently glanced at him. He pointed out his mistake. "We're not mutually trying to kill each other. He planned for me to be in that car accident. I haven't done anything to him yet. Gritting his teeth, William said, "You'll strike back sooner or later. You're the type of person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Just because you beat up my rival for me one time back when we were studying in England, you're expecting me to do your every bidding now." Lu Beichuan smiled. "Since you know I'll retaliate eventually, why are you asking me why I woke up half a month earlier than planned?" William icily looked at him. "As your doctor, I have the right to know your plans so that I can design the next part of your physical therapy. Before, you wouldn't listen to my advice and got out of bed several times. I stressed this point to you several times. Although you're capable of walking, you haven't fully recovered. If you force yourself to stand up, it will only do more harm than good. I'll arrange for a specialist caretaker to help you perform daily exercises for recovery." "All right, I know." William pushed down his anger. "Lastly, there's something else I have to tell you." Lu Beichuan questioningly looked at him. "Your father has been looking for someone. From what I know, he's your younger half-brother. His name is Lin Zhen." Hearing this name, Lu Beichuan's expression sunk. His gaze was as sharp as knives when he looked at William. "Who? Lin Zhen?" William told him all of the information he had acquired. "His mother is one of your father's lovers. A while ago, after your father's lover died, your younger brother left with the woman. But, there's a matter that's quite interesting." Lu Beichuan looked at him. "The woman that your brother left with looks exactly the same as Yi Qing. Based on my investigation, Lin Zhen probably left with a woman named Yi Zhen. Yi Zhen and your wife, Yi Qing, are identical twins. Yi Qing is the older sister, and Yi Zhen is the younger sister." "Yi Zhen?" Lu Beichuan raised his eyebrows. "Her name is Yi Zhen?" Lu Beichuan thought of his little wife. She had told him fragments of information when she was at his bedside and massaging him. Once she had said, "I'm 22 years old. I've never been in a relationship or lived for myself before. I don't even know how it happened really, but I took my older sister's place in marrying you to bring you good luck. I do my best to serve you, but look, there's no place for me in this family." Took her older sister's place in marrying him? Lu Beichuan continued stroking the marks on his wrist. "How interesting. There's nothing you want to say?" "What's there to say? He's just an illegitimate child. Illegitimate children can have inheritance rights too." Lu Beichuan scoffed. "If it's something I don't want to give away, other people shouldn't even try to imagine taking even the tiniest bit from my hands." "You miserly capitalist." William, who was from a beautifully harmonious family, couldn't understand such a complicated family situation. "I've said everything that I should. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving." Lu Beichuan called out to stop him. "You don't have to give that medicine to Uncle Xiao anymore." For a short while, William didn't react. "What medicine?" Lu Beichuan succinctly said, "Medicine for deep sleep." William suddenly realized, "That medicine, don't worry about it. It doesn't have any negative side effects. It's beneficial for the body." "I said," Lu Beichuan repeated, "don't give that medicine to Uncle Xiao anymore." William raised his eyebrows. "All right, I understand. But, I saw those red marks on your wife's neck a few days ago, so I told her to go to a hospital to check for allergies." He looked around the room, shrugged, and said, "There's a bad thing in this room." William heartily laughed and took this opportunity to leave the room. Lu Beichuan languidly leaned against the headboard. His eyes narrowed. He really was feeling tired after speaking so much after waking up so recently. The car accident had happened a year ago. Half a year later, he had regained consciousness. At that time, most of his authority that old Master Lu had given him had fallen into Lu Shaoran's hands, and he couldn't feel anything below his waist. The diagnosis was that he might spend the rest of his life in bed. Just for that little bit of power, Lu Shaoran had ruthlessly harmed his own son. Father and son? Lu Beichuan sneered. Yi Zhen was standing at the doorway. Seeing the dark scowl on Lu Beichuan's face, her mood was extremely complicated. He had just woken up and was already working on a major scheme? He really didn't know how to stop and be peaceful. It served him right to have such a horrible ending. Yi Zhen walked over. Her face showed resentment that things weren't going according to plan. "Are you okay?" Lu Beichuan opened his eyes. He thoughtfully looked at her. He didn't know why she was feeling aggrieved and worried, but seeing this sight, his mood suddenly improved. Half joking, he asked, "I heard you have a younger sister. Her name is Zhen?" Zhen choked and extremely unnaturally blinked. She hid her real feelings and thoughts behind a blank expression. "What? You're identical twins, right? Do the two of you look exactly the same?" Faced with Lu Beichuan's piercing gaze, she felt as if there was nowhere to hide. Zhen felt as if he had completely seen through her facade. She felt a prickling sensation on her back. Yes, we look exactly the same." Lu Beichuan deliberately toyed with her. "Since the two of you are exactly the same, has there ever been a situation when you took advantage of this?" Zhen felt weak, but she maintained a calm appearance. Looking at Lu Beichuan, she sternly spoke as if justice was on her side. "That's not possible. Although we look the same, our personalities are different. My younger sister has been cowardly since we were children. She doesn't like to speak. She's especially not likable. Even if we remain silent, a person that's familiar with us can easily distinguish us. Even if we try to pretend to be each other, it's inevitable that flaws will appear." "You're right. No matter how much work is put into pretending, flaws will inevitably appear." Lu Beichuan nodded. "No one is exactly the same as another person. Even if two people are very similar, there's bound to be minor differences. And as long as there's a slight difference, there will be a way to differentiate. Don't worry, I'll be able to recognize you. I definitely won't confuse you with your sister. Oh, and it's been a while since you married into the Lu family, but you still haven't formally returned home, right? Wait a few days, and I'll go with you to your old home to see your parents and younger sister." Zhen. She decided that it would be better if the villain spent his time hatching a major scheme.